one of the most important things in identifying strengths in a relationship is changing our lens, right? Changing the way we look at things. So there are two ways to look at the world, right? We can, I mean, how many of you have heard of this phrase, glasses half empty versus half full, right? This cliche is something that, most of us have heard of, that you can take a cup, right? And you can say, okay, this cup right now, oh man, it's half empty, right? I can look at that and I can focus on the fact that it's half empty and I'm missing half of my drink. Or I can look at the same cup, right? And I can say, actually, it's half full. I still have half left, right? And those are two different ways, two different paradigms, two different ways to look at the same thing, which is this cup, right? So it's the same thing with our life. We can look at our life as half full, or we can look at what's half empty in our life. I use this example in my classes, and I think it's very illustrative, where there's this meme and it has a picture of two boys. One boy is holding one slice of cake, so he's really, really happy. You see him really smiling big. And then just below him is another boy holding an entire cake with one slice missing, so he's sad. Okay, so when you compare these two boys, you see that, well, number one, who has more cake? Well, the answer is the one who's sad actually has more cake, right? But why is he sad? And the answer is because he's focused on what's missing. He's focused on what's missing in what he has. Whereas the one on the top is focused on what he actually has, rather than what's missing in his life. So if we look at the world in this way, and then specifically if we look at our relationship in this way, if we change our lens to being a half full lens, like the lens with which we see the world is one where we're looking at what we have instead of what we don't have, or what's missing, or what's going wrong in our lives. So it's really about changing our entire paradigm. Okay. So when we change our lens, we will start to be able more to pick up on the strengths in our relationship. We can't pick up on the strengths if our entire focus is just on, oh, that went wrong, that needs to change, that needs to be fixed, that needs to be solved. If our entire focus is on problems and on what needs to be fixed and what needs to be solved, we won't even be able to recognize the strengths, because our lens is very half empty type of lens. So we have to first change the lens, and then once we do that, we'll be more able to recognize the strengths in a relationship, to recognize, this is something I'm very grateful for in my husband or in my wife. This is something I really love about our relationship. But it really has to do with changing the lens to focus on our blessings rather than focusing on what we don't like or what's missing in our relationship and in our life. So once you kind of change the lens, you'll start to see the things that you like, the things that are the strengths in your relationship. Now, how do you capitalize on that? How do you then build on that? The answer is actually quite simple, and that is to show appreciation. There's a principle that we learn in the Quran. وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِنْ شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you are thankful, He will increase. So He says, if you are, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِنْ شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful, I will increase you. So you see this divine principle that anytime you're thankful for something, anytime you are grateful for something, you get more of that blessing. And so this is one of the best ways to capitalize on a strength in your relationship, is to show gratitude for it, is to show thankfulness for it. If there's a behavior that your spouse exhibits, one of the best ways to actually keep that behavior and to increase that behavior is to show gratitude for that behavior, to show appreciation for that behavior. Same thing with your child. If you see something that you like in your family member, whether it's your spouse or your child, and you show that person that you really appreciate it. I really, really appreciated that you did this for me last night, or I really appreciate this quality about you. I really, really, I'm grateful for you and for this in our relationship. When you do that, you motivate the other person to actually want to do even more, right? And when you do the opposite, when you show ingratitude, and when you show a lack of appreciation, you actually demotivate that person to do more. You see, people are not motivated by criticism, they're more motivated by appreciation. So if you want to strengthen or build or capitalize on a strength in your relationship or in another person, show appreciation for it and it will increase. What happens if if you do have a problem in your relationship, should we just ignore it, pretend it's not there, and it'll just go away? Well, the answer is no. I don't advise people to ignore problems because that's a little bit like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. It doesn't make it go away. And in fact, it just grows and it becomes infected over time. So it's important that we do show gratitude for what's going right, but that we also address the problems that are going wrong. And it's very, very important that we don't just pretend that everything's okay and think that it's going to be okay. Some people, they think if they deny a problem, it'll go away. That's not how it works. Denying that you have a gunshot wound and covering it up isn't going to make it go away, and it will only get worse. And so it is important that we do address the problems that we have in our relationships, but we address them in the right way. We address them through the correct channels. And I'll just briefly talk about that. I'll tell you what the incorrect channel is, and that is just sort of gossiping to various people about the problem. That's not going to help the problem, and it can actually just make it worse. I'll tell you some of the ways that can make it worse. Number one, if you share your problem with someone who doesn't give very good advice, they may advise you in a way that is actually quite toxic and not give you very good advice. Number two is that it can get back to the individual who you're having the conflict with and actually make it worse. It can spread in that way. It can grow arms and legs. One other issue is that even when the couple themselves resolve the problem, but if it's spread outside, it can kind of come back and maybe just haunt them. So just for the sake of gossiping, that's not useful. Now, when is it useful to share it with another person? Well, the answer is when you're getting help, when you're seeking help. And I advise people to do that. I advise people to go to counseling. I advise people to seek help from a trusted individual who can mediate, who can counsel, who can help. And in that case, it's not backbiting. In fact, we are supposed to try to seek help when we are having problems in our relationships. Just like if we have a health problem, you have a disease or you have anything wrong with your body, we're told to go to a doctor, right? In the same way, when we have a problem within our relationships, we should go to a doctor or a counselor, a mediator, or someone that can help us, and that is actually something that we'll be rewarded for, because we're trying to fix it. We're not going there, just to make our spouse look bad, but we're actually trying to fix the problem. So that's something that we have to do as part of our worship, and it's something that can be very beneficial. So we don't ignore our problems. We don't pretend that they're not there and expect them to go away, but we also make sure that we're going to the right sources for help, and that we're going to the people who can really give us good advice and who can actually aid in working out that problem rather than possibly making it worse. But first and foremost, one of the most important things that we can do to build that resilience and that strong fortress is through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are the type of person who as a sort of a habit, we are consistent in the remembrance of Allah every day, without fail, regardless of what we're going through, but we are consistent in our salah, consistent in our prayers, consistent in our Quran, consistent in our athkar. If that, when that, what that type of person is doing is that with every prayer, with every time they read the Quran, with every time they do their athkar, morning and evening and before they sleep and throughout their day, every time they remember Allah, they are building a brick into that house. They are adding another brick, another strong foundation to the home itself. And now that becomes something that can withstand any type of storm that later faces that individual or that later faces that family. But it's very essential that it's something that we're building all the time. It's not just, you can't just suddenly build that house as soon as the storm hits, right? It has to be something that you are already building daily on as your daily routine. So the remembrance of Allah is essential. Second, in terms of the strength of your relationship and the resilience of your relationship, well, this kind of goes to have to do with emotional bank accounts. How much are we doing for the other person, and the more that we are investing in the relationship and investing in the other person, the more we're building a strong foundation, so that if the relationship does go through challenges, it still has that strength, that strong sort of fortress that it can withstand that storm. So again, I think the answer really has to do with not just how are we behaving when the storm hits. It's not really about how we're going to be when the challenge is facing us, but really the question is, how are we outside of the storm? What are we doing in our everyday life to build that strong foundation and that strong fortress around ourselves and around our relationships? And again, first and foremost, it has to be based in the remembrance of Allah, because that is what gives our house a strong foundation. And that's what's going to protect us and allow us not to be destroyed when we face these challenges of life.